I spend half my time as a woodworker, running a woodworking business, and half my time as a remote design coach. And I live in a little cottage next to a forest in Sussex, which is in the UK. So a big hello from the UK. And on the woodworking side, this is our workshop where I spend a lot of time with my husband, and you can see lots of old tools in the back and lots of new tools. So I'm very a big fan of hybrid, using old things at work, old wisdom, ancient rituals, but also new things, and kind of choosing what serves us. And we make bespoke furniture and sculpture here. And we're all called Nafisi Studio. So you can check out us if you're into woodworking. We've already mentioned previously before the call that someone's really into woodworking. So yeah, do check us out there. So on the remote design coaching side, this is my office. I've been working like this for about 2 years now, very much next to Abdullah. And 90% of the people that I meet, I've never met before in person, which I think is bizarre, but is the new norm. Because most of my clients are found online and I meet them online. And I coach in short contracts, so I normally do 3 to 6 months. And I either do this one-to-one with the designer, or I do it for a whole team. And either we're working on a specific skill set in design that they want to upskill on, or some inner work that they would like to push forward and make progress in their personal life. And I've been doing this from my studio, all on my laptop, all using remote softwares. With a huge range of time zones. But remote wasn't actually new to me, because before lockdown, I had been 2 years fully remote consulting. And 3 years prior to that, I'd been at Facebook as a senior designer. And we've been building new products across multiple surfaces. And in order to create multiple products across multiple surfaces, you need teams across multiple time zones. And so when I joined the London team, there was about 15 designers, and that grew to 40 by the time that I left. So it saw rapid double growth. And at peak points, I was working with about 30 different teams. And they were in London, San Francisco, but also New York, Seattle, Tel Aviv. I traveled to Berlin. I went to Paris. We did team bonding across different continents. And I also did research in Vietnam. And in Hong Kong. So those, 2 weeks, 3 weeks in another country, just working remote. So I want to have a big caveat while we talk about time zones today, and when we talk about distributed teams and resilience, because normal remote working, as I'm speaking about it, is not the same as pandemic remote working, and we shouldn't confuse the two. And I know it's difficult to, if it's your first time doing remote work, but they're definitely not the same, because not being able to see your friends, not being able to see your family, having a curfew, having restricted time outside, dealing with high volumes of sick people, not being able to travel has nothing to do with remote work. So it's really good to bear that in mind as we go through. But I want to start with some of the aspirational, really good stuff that we all here have in common, right? So I'm going to start with my kind of personal view. And my personal view is that remote is an upgrade to life. It's a quality upgrade. Give me thumbs up, guys, if you're all seeing this good. Thumbs up? Yeah, okay, good. So my personal view, and I'll start with kind of my ideological one, is that I believe everybody should have access to opportunity. It should be universal. It shouldn't be based on where you live. It shouldn't be based on how many degrees you have. The top talent in the world should be what makes you hireable, whether you have that skill. And so really right now, I feel like this whole revolution is fighting for workers' rights. We're fighting for carers, we're fighting for neurodivergent people, we're fighting for parents who are, I looked it up before this, are about 70 to 95% of the workforce, so most people, who all require flexibility. The other thing I believe is, as I said, the best talent should get the job. So not whether you can afford to be in the local area, and not if you have 8 consecutive hours of time next to each other. That just seems absurd. And thirdly, I believe in the carbon reduction. So I've looked at the studies, and after including all the extra residential demands that we've been incurring by being at home, the overall energy usage is still dropping 24 million tons annually. So that's kind of my personal ideological. And then in my own life, what have I experienced? You know, what have I seen? Well, I've seen real deeper relationship connections with my friends and with my lover. I've seen my quality of time upgrade because I've had 2 hours to replace from commuting to meditation and exercise. I've definitely started eating better because I'm not eating out, whereas before I was always buying food from Pret or whatever it was around the corner. Terrible. And also I can choose my snacks. And I'm also saving a lot of money, not doing all of that, buying out, and all those takeaway coffees and things like that. So those are things I've seen. And I've also seen a quality of mind upgrade. You know, being able to just do what I want when I want. I don't want to work here today. I want to go to the park. I want to go to the coffee shop. I want to go here and there. Those really, really bring diversity and more creativity, and therefore I have a better quality of thinking. I've been able to travel more, not this year, and been able to live, you know, move anywhere around. So that's kind of my point of view, but it's actually, there's global evidence, and it's really made me giggle this week. Have you been watching the news? Have you watched yeah, okay. So Apple employees have been pushing back to return to the office. And this made me giggle because they have, this is a 2.1 trillion company, right? They have 6-figure salaries. They have $3 billion office, like the best office in the world. And they get free everything. And yet it's still not enough. And that's because remote is the way forward. And so I want us to bear that in mind. There's a really great guy called Chris Hurd on Twitter that you can follow. I don't know if any of you are already following him. He did a survey with a small sample, but 1,500 people, asking how do they perceive the future of remote. And I really enjoyed kind of reading through the thread and the answers. And I've pulled out some of my favorites, which was rural living is going to increase, so moving away from the city, and you know, having a better quality of life, having cheaper rent, maybe living more humbly, but having that space of mind. Written over spoken documentation. So that means we are all in a job still, guys. So that's good because we need designers to design these softwares for better communication. And really focusing on output rather than how much time I'm spending in the office or how visible I am, you know? Oh, that's one of my big bugbears. So I'm really behind that. I see that as a really hopeful future. And then, you know, just life-work balance being hugely more important to people. So seeing massive waves of people being part-time and freelance because they think, well, why do I need to be full-time? I don't need to be. So yeah, those are kind of some really, oh yeah, and hobby renaissance. So people really spending a lot more time in the local community, doing things together and celebrating that, and leading to more deeper connection and really helping the loneliness issue that's been arising. So that's all the kind of the good bits. And where does that leave us as designers? Well, we design habits and behaviors, right? That's our job. And often we kind of pigeonhole ourselves into this very small area of designing just moments or designing short term, you know, just designing one screen, or maybe just designing one interaction, or maybe just a couple of flows, or maybe push or shove, maybe a behavior. But most of us aren't thinking more long-term about how are we influencing people's rituals and habits, and how those instances and moments multiply over time and become long-term shifts. So I think in this context, we need to be thinking, you know, what types of habits do we want to be having? And how can we reverse engineer those habits into rituals and behaviors that we design? So I think that's a kind of rhetorical question for the whole talk. So I want to bring you to the concept of etiquette. I have a little think. If you open the chat window, have a little chat. Brilliant, I've got that up too. Open the chat window and just ping me words. What comes to mind when you think of the word etiquette? What kinds of things come to mind? Responsiveness, social norms, brilliant. Consideration for others, nice. Psychological safety, brilliant, yeah. Empathy, Mm. Sensitivity to time zone. Somebody's listening. Yeah, brilliant. Support, politeness. Excellent. Oh, brilliant. They're very, very positive. I'm really happy with that. I think when I thought about it, I was thinking of more negative things about superficial etiquettes, about superficial words, and about being PC and things you're allowed not to say, and things like that. But that's really great that you have some great connotations. Well, in the dictionary, it says that it's this polite behavior in society or among a professional group. So as a group of designers, as a profession, we have new etiquettes emerging as we shift, right? As we shift into remote. And I want to tell you, this is not new, right? This is really old. So let's go back in history and have a look at some weird and wacky etiquettes. In the 1890s, you were never allowed to ask a direct question. Can you imagine that? Especially in American culture, right? Which, you know, is much more blunt than British culture, generically. So you wouldn't be able to say, how are you doing? That's very rude. No, instead, you'd rephrase the question and you say, I hope you're doing well. This way, you're not putting someone on the spot and asking them for an answer. You're just giving them your good intention. Nowadays, I think we think the opposite, right? We think, well, I think it's rude not to ask someone how they are. So that's really interesting how that shifted. Okay, another one. 1940, okay? The salt and pepper must remain together. That's a bit weird, isn't it? Well, separating the salt and pepper was a big etiquette no-no, because you always move them together. Even if someone only asked for one, you would share both of them. And again, this is trying to be considerate. It's saying, if you want one, I assume that you want the other, and I'm not going to cause you the annoyance and hassle of having to ask me a second time, especially if it's a big long table, you know, to pass it again. So I'm just going to pass you both, and that's trying to be considerate, even though that seems really weird today. Okay, last one. In the 60s, you weren't allowed to drink with your right hand. Okay, why? Why can't I have two drinks? That sounds more fun. No, because your right hand is for meeting and greeting. And if you have a drink in your right hand, it's basically standoffish, isn't it? Saying, I don't really want to talk to you guys. I'd much rather enjoy my own company over here. And that's saying that you're not social. And that's saying that you're not interested in speaking to people. So again, very strange. I don't think anyone today would even think twice about it. I think they just probably like the fact you had two drinks and give you a cheers. So things change. Now let's come back to tech. In the 90s, we had the computer taking over. In the 2000s, we had the internet taking over. These are rough, guys. Don't mess with me. These are rough. Actually, no. In 2010, we had software and mobile taking over. And in the 2020s, roughly, remote is taking over. You could argue either way slightly. So what kind of new etiquettes are going to emerge? Well, we've already seen some. So, you know, a while back, we saw software changing. And I think this one's great for designers because we had to share a lot of new documents, and so software became prolific, right? It became affordable and anybody could have it on their computer. And so you had to start being considerate when you shared your file. And as designers, if we didn't label our files, no one could find their way around our Photoshop file or sketch file. So this is a big no-no to avoid. And the social norm became to label your layers. And so this is an example of an etiquette, a consideration for others. Let's take another one. Email. Email's changed quite a lot. So you used to sign off with some kind of personal note and say yours sincerely, because we were, you know, especially in the 80s, we're looking at kind of mimicking the handwritten letter still. Yours sincerely, it's more formal. But now, you know, just saying that you sent it by mobile, sent from iPhone, that's enough. You don't have to sign off anything else. Or, oh yeah, and excuse the typos. So, or just having links to my social channels, or just having my name, or using it as a call to action for booking a meeting, or, you know, talking about the environment. Please don't print this unless you have to. So it's really gone from this personalized element to a generic automated element. So etiquette changes, and no one finds that rude. Here's another one moving forward. When the proliferation of mobiles happened, everybody had one. And suddenly meetings were quite difficult because you couldn't really talk to anyone because their head was down. And so phones generally got not banned, but the social etiquette was to not look at your mobile or laptop during a meeting, right? Because it's kind of rude. But then as we move forward, we realize that it's so much easier to write in Notion during a meeting and Google Docs than have to write it on a pen and paper and then write it up later. And if it's a shared note, we're all going to save time being on a shared document. So it shifted. And actually now it's okay to have your mobile out as long as you're kind of using the 50-70 rule. So the 50-70 rule is if I'm talking to you, then I should be looking at you 50% of the time and looking away 50% of the time, just so that I'm not too intense and like staring at you. And if I'm listening, or you guys, as you're listening, you should be looking at me 70% of the time and 30%, you know, looking around, having a drink or doing whatever you're doing. Otherwise, you two would be like this at me and I would be slightly freaked out by everybody doing that. So etiquettes change. I think you get the point. So why do we have etiquette? We do it to be respectful and considerate. And a lot of the answers you came up with in the chat actually were speaking to that. So I want to think of, you know, what does respectful and considerate mean now? So my interpretation of remote etiquettes are about how we face these challenges together in the face of remote challenges. And I think the kind of three big ones that I've experienced in my career, working with hundreds of designers, coaching, you know, time and time again, what's come up with these three big ones: communication friction, ineffective meetings, and burnout. Now, these challenges are not new. They've been around forever, but remote has certainly increased them and they've become more prolific. And so we have to be aware that if these are the top challenges, all good things like remote comes with challenges. We have to take both of them, right? Now, I don't have time today to talk through all of them, so I'm just going to take the top one. You can see the other two are crossed out, but we can talk about them another time, or you can reach out to me and discuss them later. So communication friction. I'm going to talk about some of my kind of pet peeves and how some tips and things on how you can avoid them or embrace them. So, number one, are you ready? Are you gripped? Avoid, if you can, setting up a meeting without asking somebody what time zone they're in. It's really annoying. If you are moving around, let's say, like one of my colleagues, if you are moving around each week because you're enjoying your remote life, your time zone is going to change and you're going to update. Just because you live in one country doesn't mean that you're there. Just because your skin color looks like you're from one country doesn't mean you are. Just because your LinkedIn says you are doesn't mean you're there. There are so many things, accents, background. There are so many cues that we could use to assume someone, and we don't do it on purpose. We don't mean to. It just happens naturally because we're trying to build rapport. But just ask them. That's the best thing to do. And to send both. So I'll always ask, you know, this works for me, but what are you in? And if I already know, then I'll just automatically put both. And I'll put theirs first, hopefully, and then mine. And it just saves a whole load of hassle. And it's inclusive. So it sounds like a small thing, but it really makes a difference, especially if you're a team leader and you're in, you know, with a lot of people. You can really exclude someone by constantly missing out their time zone. They're like, yeah, thanks, I'm just gonna go now and look that up on Google to try and work out what time this meeting is. You know, that's not nice. So good luck to you if you've got 5 zones and every single line of text has to have 5, but at least it's more inclusive. Cool. Top tip. If you don't have it already, go check out this Chrome extension. It's called Figure It Out, and it's beautiful. It's pretty. So you just install it, and every time you open a new tab, you can add new time zones, and it looks gorgeous, and it just keeps you aware of the people in your life, whether it's family or colleagues who are in different time zones. So I highly recommend that. Figure it out. Cool. The other thing is being smooth. Now, this one might not resonate with you so much if you're constantly using Google Hangouts or Zoom or Microsoft Teams, because they organize the dialing codes for you. But if you are having a bad day and something's not working and you just need to call them and you need to pick up that phone, make sure you add the international calling code. Don't make them trawl through a million websites to try and find out what it is, then dial, then misdial. That's not smooth. So do what you can to make it really, really easy for someone. And here's a top tip: bookmark timeanddate.com or another dialing calc, or maybe you have a script. Maybe you already have something like this already, but make sure it's on hand just in case, because it's useful not for the times when you don't need it. For the norm, it's there in an emergency. Cool. Well, another thing is that because of, you know, years and years of working 9 to 5, we assume that everybody works 9 to 5. Don't. Avoid that behavior. Ask them, what hours are you working today? It's very simple. It sounds really simple, but the amount of times that I have not done that myself, and then I've made a boo-boo because I've set something up and actually it wasn't a great time for the other person. So, or I've expected, I told myself a story in my head that they're going to reply, obviously, and I completely forgot that obviously they're not working these dates. Now, I know there are other techniques and tools that we can use to have visibility on calendars and things like that, but asking is the most fluid and the most relational. Another top tip is you can draw a overlapping clock. So I do this, especially with long-term engagements with clients. The inner ring is one time zone and the outer ring is another. And then you just rotate the dials on the outer ring to when they align. And you'll see that London and SF have 4 hours overlap, and London, for instance, New York have 7. And then you can kind of just visualize, because we're visual people, which are the best times to kind of focus. And especially if you're working with multiple, imagine here I also have Berlin and I also have Tel Aviv. You know, it's gonna reduce a lot of cognitive load for me to have that drawn up somewhere as either a screensaver or whatever. Oh, and just on that last one, you'll notice that I haven't put 2 hours. So standard deviation from 9 would be going back 9 a.m., 8 a.m., 7 a.m. 2 hours the other way is 5 p.m. till 6 till 7. So I've done 2 hours longer than both people's normal days. Now, this is often not a widely held view of the world. Often it's only 1 hour back for America and 4 hours forward for the UK. And that's normally because people culturally accept that it's easier to work late than it is to work early. And so that's, again, something to be aware of. Those kind of assumptions about someone's availability will become visible when you make a clock like this. And then you can decide, no, we don't want that. We're going to just have an overlapping of 2 or whatever it is that you guys prefer. So it's a great negotiation tool as well. Cool. What we want to avoid is making every conversation a meeting. Who feels that? Too many meetings? Yeah. 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 Some nods. Yeah. So be selective with why you need a meeting. Maybe you can just comment in a document. Maybe you can email. Maybe you can have a video with EO spelt wrong, or a voice note. Just avoid them if you can, because it's going to take up a lot of people's energy, and meetings, good meetings, take a lot of prep and preparation. So my kind of top tip as a rule of thought, this is just my experience. So again, take it with a pinch of salt. I have found that high-stake meetings or time-sensitive meetings are better for synchronous. So have them face-to-face. So if you're making a decision, if you are critiquing somebody or somebody's work, if you are having a one-on-one, or if you are having a performance conversation, those are going to be the best for synchronous, for having a face-to-face Zoom call. Asynchronous is better when you're doing kind of status updates, when you're doing announcements as a team, when you're knowledge sharing, especially great video, when you're learning, or when you're giving feedback, because these are low stakes and they're not as time sensitive. So just bear that in mind and ask yourself, do I really need this meeting? Or is there another reason why I'm craving it? Is there another way that I can meet this need in myself? Maybe I'm just lonely. Maybe I need to go and see my friends, and so forth. Cool. Another one that it comes up quite a lot, especially as a consultant, I notice, is no-shows. So if you do a no-show and it happens to everyone, right? Something happens and you forget that you're meant to be somewhere, or you sleep in, or something happens. It's okay, but address it immediately. Go and email that person as soon as you realize. Try and turn up to the meeting late, even if you are late, because it's better to be late than to not come at all. And that's often a misconception, because people think, oh, the embarrassment of turning up to a meeting late is just really uncomfortable and I want to avoid those feelings. But actually, being there, being present, you might get some work done. You might exchange some value. And at least you're showing that you're alive and around. And that's actually going to reduce your client or your co-worker's anxiety. Whereas not hearing from you is going to imprint it in their mind as more of a trauma. This person is unreliable and I don't really want to work with them, or I'm anxious about working with them in the future, right? You're going to do less traumatic damage or reputational damage if you just be honest and say, I'm sorry, but I'm here now. Cool. Reminders help, but they don't always work. So just remember that in Zoom, you can have this upcoming meeting reminder. And you can also, you're meant to do it on your phone as well. A lot of people have that because their calendars don't sync. So check your iPhone or your Android that it's syncing with your Zoom app, and check your desktop separately. Also, if you're using something like Calendly, you can automate that. So you don't even have to think about it to remind the person you're meeting with, which I love. Cool. Yeah, booking a call. Here's one to avoid: assuming that you know where they're going to take it. So I get this a lot because I work with people from very different countries. So their working environments, their cultures, their best practices are all very different. Not everybody sits in an office that's quiet. Not everybody has a home that's quiet. So I think just always, if you can, embrace asking them, look, do you need a room to have this call, if you can book it for them? Or if you're not internally meeting, if you're meeting with someone external, just saying, you know, are you going to be traveling, or are you going to be in a quiet space? Especially if you want to share something with them, tell them, I want to screen share with you. So I'd really appreciate it if you could find a quiet space. There's nothing worse than, you know, preparing lots of work, coming to a meeting, and then someone's just not in the headspace because they're taking a call, or they're multitasking, or they're on the bus. Likewise, it's happened to me the other way around. So when I was working with someone at Facebook, I assumed that when they were calling me on the bus, that meant that they just wanted to catch up, because in my head, they were on a sweaty, crap, bus. But lo and behold, when I turned on the video, they were sitting there with their iced latte, with a desk, with the full screen, with brilliant Wi-Fi, with the AC blowing in their hair, and they were ready to get feedback from me. And I was not ready at all. And so it's just really good to just try and be aware and communicate, what kind of level of meeting are we having? Do we need screen sharing? Are you getting feedback from me? Ask it, tell it, give it, share it. Cool. A lot of these are rules kind of for bigger groups, not just one-on-ones, because one-on-one, I think you can be a lot more fluid and a lot more casual. But obviously it depends whether it's a client, the relationship. But I think that generally when there's greater than 2 people, you should always send them an agenda. If you don't send them an agenda and outcomes, you're just not going to get the most of your time, even if you have great rapport, great trust. In fact, even more in that case, because you might then chin wag and catch up and actually not stick to your agenda because you're having a great chit chat. So set the goals, set the outcomes, attach the pre-reads. It's all in the planning. The best meetings are really thought through and planned. Okay. So another one which makes me more nervous is because I could get caught out at any moment today, but don't over-rely on text, because tech always fails, something goes wrong. And we should expect that, we're learning, we're growing, the tech industry is not God, it is infallible, it has lots of mistakes, we're humans. So put in place backup mechanisms. over communicate the times. Don't rely on that calendar invite actually being visible and syncing. What happens if it doesn't sync? What happens if they're scrolling around trying to find the link? Just message them, send them an email, double check things and make sure that anywhere they look, the information is available. You might say, yes, but Kate, that sounds very inefficient. You know, it's not a good use of my time. Humans, we have to accept our fragility as well as embrace technology. We have to accept our faults and warts. Humans forget. Humans are disorganized. Humans often can't find things. So remind them, help them, because tech will fail. Yeah, let's be compassionate. Okay, cool. Try and avoid verbally agreed follow-ups. And I'm sure all of you guys do this already, you know, being an agency. If you don't write up what you've said verbally with your client, then so much can be misremembered and forgotten. And they remember that you said one price and you remember another, and the whole thing is a mess. And I'm sure each of you can think of stories where you're like, oh, I didn't get that in writing, why? So it's the same even with your colleagues and in any kind of meeting. Try and write a summary. The other thing is that, again, humans, we forget. And if we're multitasking and you're working on multiple projects, even if you're really present and aware and you have an excellent memory, it's going to help just to reference and go back to notes and have a place that you can remember. Our brains are consuming far more information than we ever have in our lifetimes in a day. So, all right. Who has had a day where they had back-to-back meetings? Raise your hands. Oh no, a lot of you, yeah. That doesn't feel great, does it? No. So try and establish the practice of 20-50 rule. If someone sends you a meeting invite to a 30-minute rule, say, love that invite. Can you make it 20 minutes? If someone sends you a meeting invite to a 60-minute meeting, say, thank you. I love your invite. I'm looking forward to our meeting. Could you please reduce it at the beginning or at the end by 10 minutes? And that's really going to just give you time to and breathe and let your jaw kind of just relax from talking and let your shoulders sink, let you go to a bio break, let you have a stretch your legs, you know, stroke your cat or dog or whatever it is, just water the plants, do something human, because we're not meant to be on screens all the time. So on that note, if you would like to take a breath, you're welcome. And just breathe in some extra oxygen because this is your lunch break. Okay, cool. Having a meeting, but not really needing it, but I don't want to cancel it because then I'm a canceller. No, have you not heard of CanLeave? Cancellation relief. Everybody has cancellation relief. As soon as someone cancels a meeting, you're like, oh, thank God, I have 30 minutes back. Everybody loves it. I've never met anyone that doesn't like it. I literally have never met anyone. Everyone loves it. So stop worrying about canceling. If there is no clear agenda and you're not even sure why you're meeting, cancel it. That doesn't make you evil or nasty. That makes you efficient and kind and respectful. It's good etiquette. So let's reverse these norms. Okay, so to summarize, we're at the end of my pet peeves. If we want to embrace the antidote to this remote friction problem, this this emerging, increasing communication problem that we have, then we need to tackle the problem twofold. We've talked about some external things that you can do, which is essentially having awareness and respect for other people's times and their working preferences. Asking them, not assuming, making an effort to adapt to them and be flexible. But now we also need to talk about the inner work. And the internal antidote is building resilience, because resilience is what makes us happy when we are dealing with really tough times. So let's talk a little bit about resilience. Okay, so the inner work, this is how you choose to respond to a situation. The external world is happening around you, and you can't control this external world. You can't make your boss on time to a meeting. You can't force your neighbor to stop their noisy lawnmower or music or whatever it is, but you can choose how you respond to it. And so resilience is the ability to withstand adversity and bounce back from it, from difficult life events. So if you're a super resilient person, I'm sure some of you will think of people in your life, you think, oh yeah, they're so resilient. Does it mean that they don't suffer? Does it mean that they don't have anxiety or stress? No, they do. Everyone does. But what it does mean is that they have a mental toughness to work through that emotional pain and suffering. And that is their advantage. So resilience is really important because it gives people that strength they need to work through emotional pain and suffering. And if we're going through COVID or the global recession or adapting to a new way of working or a new job, it can be a very difficult experience. And so those that don't have resilience, they're going to struggle, and they're going to kind of probably move to more unhelpful and unhealthy coping mechanisms. But the people that are resilient, they're going to go to their strengths and to their support network. And they're going to find ways to overcome the challenges and the problems, and they're going to be happier. So research by Professor Sonia Lyubomirsky, who studies happiness, she says that 40% of our happiness as a pie comes from our thoughts and behaviors. And resilience is something that you learn, right? It's something that you do. It's very much about your thoughts and behaviors. So that's quite a large part of our happiness coming from our thoughts and behaviors. So the good news is that anyone can learn resilience, and therefore you can be the person that chooses your happiness or not and embraces that. So you might have heard me earlier saying bouncing back, bouncing back from adversity. When you think of resilience as a metaphor, I want you to think of it not as a trampoline. It's not a trampoline. There's no boing, 1 minute you're low, next minute you're high, none of that. It's much more like walking up a mountain. You're going up a mountain and you don't have a map, okay? So it takes time, it takes strength, it takes help from the people around you. And there's likely going to be setbacks and there's going to be problems. But eventually you get to the top of the mountain and you look back at how far you've come. And it's something that you build up over time. And it's something that you learn. So that's how I want you to think of resilience, something that you're working towards and you're layering up over time. But when we say resilience is the capacity to recover from difficult life events, what are these difficult life events? Does it mean that it has to be a long-term difficulty, like a chronic illness or abuse or poverty? Yeah, those are pretty difficult. But it doesn't have to be, because everybody is different. You're different, your mom's different, your brother's different, your kids are different. So how we perceive difficulty is different. And so it could be that you've lost your wallet. It could be a flat tire. It could be redundancy, losing a client. It could be being in a traffic jam. It could be a single criticism. It could be a single look in someone's eye that gets you down. So everybody has different sensitivity, and it's good to bear that in mind. Okay. So building resilience is building your capacity to recover. And what's important to you, as I said, is different to other people. And there's no universal formula. So how we build capacity to recover is very different. And I'm going to now whiz through some examples. We won't go into this in detail, but if you're interested, the American Academy of Pediatrics has one way of defining resilience through these, which is also helpful for adults. Better Up Lads has another way of looking at the drivers for resilience, which is really helpful, and has shown that just after a small amount of coaching, like 3 to 4 months coaching, you can increase your resilience by 125%. So it's definitely something that anyone can do. Amit Sood has a really cool test that you can do. So you can click on the link and go and do the resilience scoring and find out how resilient are you, which is quite fun. And that looks at this external and internal work. And he's also developed this list of attributes that if you want to be really, really resilient, these are the attributes that you need to have, or that people tend to demonstrate. And so I wanted to kind of end by just looking at one of these tools, which is the Burnout Scale. And this is a piece of inner reflection. This is the inner work we're talking about. We talked about outer tips and techniques. The inner work that you can do is to reflect on this scale on a weekly basis or a daily basis to see how likely am I to burn out? Am I near? Am I far? Sometimes it's difficult to tell. And this is very relevant recent news because the World Health Organization has very recently added it as a disease to the ICD, so which the International Classification of Diseases. And so you can go and check it out. It's a real thing. And the Harvard Business Review recently gave a really great article, which I'll also link to, about how to avoid burnout. And the first one that we tend to think of is workload. We think that when our capacity for how much work we have doesn't match how much we're doing, that's when we burn out. I'm overwhelmed, I'm doing too much. Not true. There are actually 5 other areas that you will notice feed into that. It might be the tipping point, but there are many reasons why we burn out, and they're often interlinked and overlapping. So what you can do as an exercise is just take a piece of paper and pen and write those 6 down on a piece of paper, and then give yourself from 0 to 10. So 0 is, I am really good. I'm not feeling any problems in this area. And 10 is, yeah, I'm not so good. I'm feeling really bad in this area. And then just mark along the scale, what are you feeling? So when it comes to work capacity, we're thinking about, you know, do I have space for balance? Am I able to rest in between my work, or am I just go, go, go? Am I able to prioritize, or do I feel like I'm constantly hitting a wall? And then you have to start to learn to say no, and to delegate, and to not do all that work yourself, and to let go of perfectionism, let go of the quality of work, so that you can have capacity and can have space. The second one is perceived lack of control. So do you perceive that you have autonomy in your role? Yes, good, 0, I have full autonomy. Or do you feel actually that everything you do is micromanaged? Because if you don't feel like you can control your environment, and or maybe your leadership don't listen to you, or that you're going to feel very out of control. I can do nothing or say nothing, and that feels really bad, and that's a huge contributor to burnout. And then reward, you know, is what you're getting worth it? Is everything, is the package of your job, is it worth it? The money, the time, the relationships, is it worth it? If it's not worth it, the reward doesn't really feel great. If it feels worth it, maybe there's only 1 or 2 niggles that don't feel worth it, you're going to be pretty good. You're going to feel pretty okay about that. Then the other area is community. And this is, you know, a more difficult one, because this is, you know, really about support and trust, whether you feel support and trusted. I'm going to go a little bit faster, so we've got 10 minutes for questions. So fairness is whether or not you believe you're receiving fair treatment, and whether you feel that your contributions are acknowledged. And then values is whether or not your values and what you value matches your company, and if there's a mismatch there. So you could be trying to push a project that you think is really important for the environment or for humanity, and they're just not seeing that, and that can really grate on you over time and can cause you to burn out. So I hope that teases you enough to go into those areas and to do a little test by yourself, and to see, you know, how far along. If you see yourself going from 5s to 10s into the red zone on a lot of them, you're probably near burnout. So you want to take that seriously, because it's a disease. You want to talk to a doctor, and you want to talk to your friends, and you want to have an internal reflection and just think, how can I move some of these things back? And maybe even have a chat about it with your manager and say, look, I did this exercise. I'm really far off on the scale. Can you help me move this scale back into a manageable area? And you can work together on that. Cool. So in summary, remote friction antidotes, the frictions that we're emerging, the new etiquettes that we need to form, is compromised of twofold. We need to do internal work, and we need to do external work. The awareness and respect for others' time and work preferences, and working on how to be more resilient, because you can learn it, you can build it, you can grow it, and you can become happier. Cool. So why am I talking about these things? Well, my belief is that people, when they connect to their internal wisdom, they become limitless. And I believe that because I've experienced it myself, and I believe that you can do that too. And that's what I do with my coaching. I believe that you are very wise, but you just need to learn to trust yourself and listen to your internal voice. So if you want to hear more about that, then this is my website, remotedesigncoaching.com, and you can sign up to the waitlist. And then when my course comes out, you'll be the first to hear about it. You can also say hi on LinkedIn and join the Remote Design Coaching group, because that's where I'm going to be posting some freebies and more goodies. And thank you. Really appreciate it.